Welcome to the stream. We're setting the stream up now. Welcome to the stream. There's no music tonight. Wow, that's so that we can accommodate the YouTube copyright system. That always freaks out when we play actual tunes. Welcome to me. Welcome to you. It's the finale of Frankenstein tonight. Frankenstein tonight. I've had 24 chapters during which to prepare a proper song as an outro for this all along, and you know I didn't. So we're gonna improvise one now. Anyhow, I've gotta make a little bit of noise while I do all the setup tasks like make sure Twitch is set up right and YouTube too. Do. Okay. So then we also need to post the what we're reading list. Hello to Lizzie Mac, other Kayleen, and Freya. Glad to see ya. Across two of the chats, we've also got Centauratron in the Discord who says Finalistine. Indeed. We are about to start on chapter 24 of Frankenstein, the final chapter. And so we're posting this pin here, pin message, posting that in the Discord as well. Boom, boom, boom. Chapter 24. Oh, yeah, pin it. Okay. So the other thing that we got to post in order to set up the stream is our tips are welcome link. Tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. We've already had our first tip of the day roll in earlier. This was between streams. Thank you very much to Paige Marin Chuck for tipping 100. We are $20 away from the first face camera expansion milestone, or we were. We are now blowing through 5 face camera expansions immediately. So thank you very much to Paige Marin Chuck for that. So please direct your attention to my face down here in slot 9 where I'm putting the hot in the hot bar, because I'm about to say, howdy y'all, Crow Hills here, expanding as I always do in Nashville, Tennessee. Dee-da-dee-da-dee, and then numero dos, even larger Joe, wah 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 wah. And then numero tres, expand my face, dee. Then numero cuatro, how about some mojo? Bum. That's not magic, that's more Joe. Hi, it's me. I'm the Joe Hills. It's me. You know, I'm realizing I probably should have had my hat ready, given how rapidly we're expanding, but that's okay. We'll make do. And then, let's see, for that next one. Each, ni, san, she, go, enter the joust. Ba. Lowering the Joe Pasty now to 90%. Thank you very much to Paige, Marin, Chuck for getting us through 5 face camera expansions immediately. That is gonna get us to 90% Joe Pasty, $20 away from the next face camera expansion milestone. Paige, Marin, Chuck wrote, happy birthday, have a great weekend. Well, thank you for the birthday wishes as well, Paige. My birthday is indeed tomorrow. And thank you for making it a little bit lighter. So, let me real quick, before we get started with the book, see, is my hat just lying around over here? I really thought it was. I thought it was in reach. Well, I can't quite locate my hat, but I did find this Green Man suit, so I guess we can always just toss that on here. La-da-da-da. Perfect. Okay, now I'm ready to go. Actually, this makes it a little hard to read Frankenstein. Maybe we'll do without that. Oh, boy. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. Is it on the floor? Oh, well. Whatever. Can't put on music and go find it, because that'll get us copyright struck. So we're just going to roll with it. You know who else has had to learn to roll with it? Is Vicky F. Let's prepare, perhaps, to read the final chapter of Frankenstein. What kinds of situations does our pal Vicky F. find himself in as we begin this final chapter? In our last reading, he was anticipating that the monster was patiently waiting to murder him on his wedding night. And so, as he waited for the monster to kill him on the night of his wedding, he heard a noise from the other room, and it turned out that the monster was actually murdering his new bride, his adopted cousin Elizabeth. And he's not too happy about that. So himself and the people of the inn and the surrounding village have gone off to search for the monster and have not found it yet. So, maybe things will start looking up. Is this one of those horror stories where everybody's magically unmurdered at the end? Like a Goosebumps book? Probably not. Probably not. Welcome, Elo Queen, Introverted Kid, and Yumi. Glad you could join us. We also have our first tip of the stream rolling in. Let's see who that is from, because that other tip was technically between streams. This one is for 25 from Simon. Thank you very much, Simon. Appreciate it. That is going to get us now 5 past our next expansion milestone, so please direct your attention to my face, because we are about to expand Jost. Do-do-do-do. And lowering the Joe opacity now to 80%. Welcome, Comic Sads. Okay. Maybe we should put... Maybe we should prepare for our reading by wrapping our green screen headband on. If we can't find my hat, maybe we make green screen headband. How's that looking? That's looking good. It's looking good. Okay, I think we can take down the setting up now sign. Looking pretty ready there. One thing we aren't ready to do is actually begin our in-game grind during this reading. We need a lot more spider webs for our large skylighting efforts. I've burnt through several shulkers worth of spider webs in the last few days. Maybe I should say the last few weeks, not days, but still. We keep running out. There's a non-trivial spider web shortage. Where is the exit that goes out to the... There it is. Tennis court. This area, anytime you come through a portal over here, it's always rough. But that's okay. Now we are settling in down here, where we can attack whatever spiders might make their way down the chute in order to attempt to murder us. I'm realizing we should probably also get some string in those. That's going to help free this up properly. Having that string across there. And then once we are into a good spider murdering pattern, I think we are ready to begin our efforts here. Okay. Let's maybe turn down the mob sound some. Hostile mobs. Down to 10%. Okay. Just in case they get particularly overwhelming. Okay. So what else do we need to do to set up the stream? We already took down the setting up stream sign. Yep, we need string. Spider string. We already mentioned we're 15 away from the next face camera expansion milestone. I need to adjust the chair slightly. There we go. Alrighty. So here we go. The final chapter of Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus by Mary Shelley. My present situation was when... I forgot to say chapter 24. Chapter 24 of Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus by Mary Shelley. My present situation was one in which all voluntary thought was swallowed up and lost. I was hurried away by fury. Revenge alone endowed me with strength and composure. It molded my feelings and allowed me to be calculating and calm at periods when otherwise delirium or death would have been my portion. My first resolution was to quit Geneva forever. My country, which, when I was happy and beloved, was dear to me, now, in my adversity, became hateful. I provided myself with a sum of money, together with a few jewels which had belonged to my mother, and departed. And now my wanderings began, which are to cease but with life. I have traversed a vast portion of the earth, and have endured all the hardships which travelers in deserts and barbarous countries are wont to meet. How I have lived, I hardly know. Many times have I stretched my failing limbs upon the sandy plain and prayed for death. But revenge kept me alive. I dared not die and leave my adversary in being. When I quitted Geneva, my first labor was to gain some clue by which I might trace the steps of my fiendish enemy. But my plan was unsettled, and I wandered many hours round the confines of the town, uncertain what path I should pursue. As night approached, I found myself at the entrance of the cemetery, where William, Elizabeth, and my father reposed. I entered it and approached the tomb which marked their graves. Everything was silent, except the leaves of the trees, which were gently agitated by the wind. The night was nearly dark, and the scene would have been solemn and affecting even to an uninterested observer. The spirits of the departed seemed to flit around and cast a shadow, which was felt but not seen, around the head of the mourner. The deep grief which this scene had at first excited quickly gave way to rage and despair. They were dead, and I lived. Their murderer also lived, and to destroy him, I must drag out my weary existence. I knelt on the grass and kissed the earth, and with quivering lips exclaimed, "By the sacred earth on which I kneel, by the shades that wander near me, by the deep and eternal grief that I feel, I swear, and by thee, O night, and the spirits that preside over thee, to pursue the demon who caused this misery, until he or I perish in mortal conflict. For this purpose I will preserve my life. To execute this dear revenge will I again behold the sun and tread the green herbage of earth, which otherwise should vanish from my eyes forever. And I call on you, spirits of the dead, and on you, wandering ministers of vengeance, to aid and conduct me in my work. Let the cursed and hellish monster drink deep of agony. Let him feel the despair that now torments me." I had begun my adjuration with solemnity and an awe which almost assured me that the shades of my murdered friends heard and approved my devotion. But the furies possessed me as I concluded, and rage choked my utterance. I was answered through the stillness of night by a loud and fiendish laugh. It rang on my ears long and heavily. The mountains re-echoed it, and I felt as if all hell surrounded me with mockery and laughter. Surely, in that moment, I should have been possessed by frenzy and have destroyed my miserable existence, but that my vow was heard, and that I was reserved for vengeance. The laughter died away, when a well-known and abhorred voice, apparently close to my ear, addressed me with an audible whisper.
I am satisfied, miserable wretch. You have determined to live, and I am satisfied.
I darted toward the spot from which the sound proceeded, but the devil eluded my grasp. Suddenly the broad disk of the moon arose and shone full upon his ghastly and distorted shape as he fled with more than mortal speed. I pursued him, and for many months this has been my task. Guided by a slight clue, I followed the windings of the Rhone, but vainly. The blue Mediterranean appeared, and by strange chance I saw the fiend enter by night and hide himself in a vessel bound for the Black Sea. I took my passage in the same ship, but he escaped, I know not how. Amidst the walls of Tartary and Russia, although he still evaded me, I have ever followed in his track. Sometimes the peasants, scared by this horrid apparition, informed me of his path. Sometimes he himself, who feared that if I lost all trace of him, I should despair and die, left some mark to guide me. The snows descended on my head, and I saw the print of his huge step on the white plain. To you, first entering on life, to whom care is new and agony unknown, how can you understand what I have felt and still endure? I was cursed by some devil and carried about with me my eternal hell, yet a spirit of good followed and directed my steps, and when I most murmured, would suddenly extricate me from seemingly insurmountable difficulties. Sometimes, when nature, overcome by hunger, sank under the exhaustion, a repast was prepared for me in the desert that restored and inspired me. The fare was, indeed, coarse, such as the peasants of the country ate. But I will not doubt that it was set there by the spirits I had invoked to aid me. Often, when all was dry, the heavens cloudless, I was parched by thirst. A slight cloud would bedim the sky, shred the few drops that revived me, and vanish. I followed, when I could, the courses of the rivers, but the demon generally avoided these, as it was here that the population of the country chiefly collected. In other places, human beings were seldom seen, and I generally subsisted on the wild animals that crossed my path. I had money with me, and gained the friendship of the villagers by distributing it. Or I brought with me some food that I had killed, which, after taking a small part, I always presented to those who had provided me with fire and utensils for cooking. My life, as it passed thus, was indeed hateful to me, and it was during sleep alone that I could taste joy. Oh, blessed sleep. Often, when most miserable, I sank to repose, and my dreams lulled me even to rapture. The spirits that guarded me had provided these moments, or rather, hours, of happiness that I might retain strength to fulfill my pilgrimage. Deprived of this respite, I should have sunk under my hardships. During the day, I was sustained and inspirited by the hope of night. For in sleep I saw my friends, my wife, and my beloved country. Again I saw the benevolent countenance of my father, heard the silver tones of my Elizabeth's voice, and beheld Clerval enjoying health and youth. Often, when wearied by a toilsome march, I persuaded myself that I was dreaming until night should come, and that I should then enjoy reality in the arms of my dearest friends. What agonizing fondness did I feel for them! How did I cling to their dear forms, as sometimes they haunted even my waking hours, and persuade myself that they still lived. At such moments, vengeance that burned in me died in my heart, and I pursued my path toward the destruction of the demon more as a task enjoined by heaven, as the mechanical impulse of some power of which I was unconscious, than as the ardent desire of my soul. What his feelings were whom I pursued, I cannot know. Sometimes, indeed, he left marks in writing on the barks of the trees, or cut in the stone that guided me and instigated my fury. My reign
is not yet over.
These words were legible in one of these inscriptions.
You live, and my power is complete. Follow me. I seek the everlasting ices of the north, where you will feel the misery of cold and frost, to which I am impassive. You will find near this place, if you follow not too tardily, a dead hare. Eat and be refreshed. Come on, my enemy. We have yet to wrestle for our lives, but many hard and miserable hours must you endure until that period shall arrive.
Scoffing devil. Again now do I vow vengeance. Again do I devote thee, miserable fiend, to torture and death. Never will I give up my search until he or I perish. Then, with what ecstasy shall I join my Elizabeth and my departed friends, who even now prepare for me the reward of my tedious toil and horrible pilgrimage. As I still pursued my journey to the northward, the snows thickened and the cold increased in a degree almost too severe to support. The peasants were shut up in their hovels, and only a few of the most hardy ventured forth to seize the animals whom starvation had forced from their hiding places to seek for prey. The rivers were covered with ice, and no fish could be procured, and thus was I cut off from my chief article of maintenance. The triumph of my enemy increased with the difficulty of my labors. One inscription that he left was in these words:
Prepare! Your toils only begin. Wrap yourself in furs and provide food, for we shall soon enter upon a journey where your sufferings will satisfy my everlasting hatred.
My courage and perseverance were invigorated by these scoffing words. I resolved not to fail in my purpose, and calling on heaven to support me, I continued with unabated fervor to traverse imminent deserts until the ocean appeared at a distance and formed the utmost boundary of the horizon. Oh. How unlike it was to the blue seasons of the south. Covered with ice, it was only to be distinguished from land by its superior wildness and ruggedness. The Greeks wept for joy when they beheld the Mediterranean from the hills of Asia, and hailed with rapture the boundary of their toils. I did not weep, but I knelt down and with a full heart thanked my guiding spirit for conducting me in safety to the place where I hoped, notwithstanding my adversary's jibe, to meet and grapple with him. So let's take a break for a second. We're at about the half-hour mark in the stream, and I need to take a few sips of my drink. I haven't spoken too much since I took a nap earlier, so my voice is still warming up a little bit. Anybody have any thoughts as we continue into the second half of the final chapter of Frankenstein? We've been reading this together for a few months now. Welcome Kai Farem, welcome Ann Old, Mycella Mum, Crystalli3, Roxygen, Swift Leader. We had a few folks pop in while I was in the middle of the reading. I try not to interrupt the readings to greet everybody quite as aggressively as I would otherwise, but I am pleased that y'all are here to join us for the final chapter of Frankenstein. Just as a reminder, we are also $15 away from the next Face Camera expansion milestone, and tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. For those of you inquiring about our HermitCraft toil of the moment, we need a bunch of spider eyes. No, we need no spiders. We need a bunch of string for the skylights of our build. And we have been, harvesting these. We've probably harvested 3 or 4 shulkers of string over the last few weeks for our build, and it has not been enough. We're going to need more. So we're just going ahead, getting some now. I can sleep only at night or during thunderstorms. Also, there might be some spiders nearby. Kai Farem says, I think it's really interesting that in a novel, which is quite inspired by Paradise Lost, Victor calls upon the spirits of his dead friends and the abstract concept of night instead of God or anything. I think to some degree, Victor might believe that God has forsaken him and might... He's not explicit about this, but the way he's treating his quest as something he must do to join his friends in the afterlife, I think he basically assumes that God has turned his back on him, that his creation of the monster and subsequent failures to handle it mean that only through intercessors might he reapproach God. Only through setting right that which he set wrong initially would he be again in God's graces and be able to join his friends in the afterlife. That's my read. Liz Use Splash says, Happy Saturday. Thank you. Yeah, we are reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the original unabridged. We have been reading this now for probably about 12 to 16 weeks. Ivan C. says, no better background for an Arctic brawl than a typhoon blowing on the window. Don't worry, I'm safe in here. Glad that you're doing well. Yeah, we've had some crazy weather here in Nashville last few weeks. Nothing as severe as some of the flooding that they've had in other parts of the world. So we're fortunate for that. But yeah. Boy, I was glad that I had, at Badger's insistence, applied some water repellent to our windshield today, because when I was driving home earlier, like it just started like absolutely pouring, and I'm not gonna say which water repellent coating that we used because they're not a sponsor. Although if you want to be, reach out to me, because your product is great, and but yeah, it's crazy how much better the windshield was dealing with the water when properly treated. But yeah, let's go ahead. It looks like we had another tip rolling in from Anonymous for 20. Thank you very much, Anonymous. We were 15 away from the next Face Gamer expansion milestone. Now we are 5 past. Please direct your attention to my face because we are about to expand. Just do. Lowering the Joe Pasty now to 70%. We are now only $15 away from the most obnoxious Face Gamer expansion milestone. Tips are welcome via paypal.me/Joe Hills and YouTube Super Chat. Cristalli3 says, I got soaked by a surprise thunderstorm today. Yeah, between the car and my front door, I ended up completely soaked. Like, my car was not very far from my front door, but there was, like, no time. It wasn't worth it to, like, get an umbrella out or whatever. But it's like I came in and I'm like, well, now I'm soaked. Oh, well. Cristalli3 says, I keep thinking that this could be the creature and Victor playing an elaborate game of tag. Didn't play tag when the creature was young, so now they're doing it this way. Yeah, well, I think that's notable, too, is that this is the most attention that the creature has ever gotten from him. And that's why he keeps, like, feeding him and stuff. Like, you know, I know he says that the creature left him, like, a dead hare to eat. But he also mentions finding packets of food from peasants and villagers earlier in his path. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that those weren't peasants and villagers. I'm pretty sure the monster has been babying you this whole time. Because he's just like, keep up, old man. Don't starve to death before I get to fight you in the Arctic. Yeah. This might also be the origin of the concept of the ice level in video games. You know? So it's like you start out in, like, grassy green areas, and then you have an ice level because that's where the creature has been feeding you to get you there. Probably not. Probably not. Centortron says he probably is a toddler acting up to get attention. Yeah, I know, right? Oh, man. Okay. So here's what we're doing. Gonna do a quick hard refresh over here before we start reading. Just as a reminder, any tips that roll in during the chapter, I won't acknowledge immediately, but I will get to when I'm at a natural break in the text. Cristalli3 says he's a very murderous and intelligent toddler. Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Howdy, Iconic Anemone in the YouTube chat as well. Okay. So we've done all the inventory management we need to do. Oh, no, we haven't. These spider eyes are constantly overflowing. Okay, now we've done all the inventory management we need to do to resume the story. And so we will do so now. Continuing chapter 24 of Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus, by Mary Shelley. Some weeks before this period, I had procured a sledge and dogs, and thus traversed the snows with inconceivable speed. I know not whether the fiend possessed the same advantages, but I found that, as before I had daily lost ground in the pursuit, I now gained on him, so much so that when I first saw the ocean, he was but 1 day's journey in advance, and I hoped to intercept him before he should reach the beach. With new courage, therefore, I pressed on, and in 2 days arrived at a wretched hamlet on the seashore. I inquired of the inhabitants concerning the fiend, and gained accurate information. A gigantic monster, they said, had arrived the night before, armed with a gun and many pistols, putting to flight the inhabitants of a solitary cottage through fear of his terrific appearance. He had carried off their store of winter food, and placing it on a sledge, to draw which he had seized on a numerous drove of trained dogs, he had harnessed them, and the same night, to the joy of the horror-struck villagers, had pursued his journey across the sea in a direction that led to no land, and they conjectured that he must speedily be destroyed by the breaking of the ice or frozen by the eternal frosts. On hearing this information, I suffered a temporary access of despair. He had escaped me, and I must commence a destructive and almost endless journey across the mountainous ices of the ocean, amidst cold that few of the inhabitants could long endure, and which I, the native of a genial and sunny climate, could not hope to survive. Yet, at the idea that the fiend should live and be triumphant, my rage and my vengeance returned, and like a mighty tide, overwhelmed every other feeling. After a slight repose, during which the spirits of the dead hovered round and instigated me to toil and revenge, I prepared for my journey. I exchanged my land sledge for one fashioned for the inequalities of the frozen ocean, and, purchasing a plentiful stock of provisions, I departed from land. I cannot guess how many days have passed since then, but I have endured misery, which nothing but the eternal sentiment of a just retribution burning within my heart could have enabled me to support. Immense and rugged mountains of ice often barred up my passage, and I often heard the thunder of the ground sea, which threatened my destruction. But again, the frost came and made the paths of the sea secure. By the quantity of provision which I had consumed, I should guess that I had passed 3 weeks in this journey, and the continual protraction of hope, returning back upon the heart, often wrung bitter drops of despondency and grief from my eyes. Despair had indeed almost secured her prey, and I should soon have sunk beneath this misery. Once, after the poor animals that conveyed me with incredible toil gained the summit of a sloping ice mountain, and one, sinking under his fatigue, died, I viewed the expanse before me with anguish, when suddenly my eye caught a dark speck upon the dusky plain. I strained my sight to discover what it could be, and uttered a wild cry of ecstasy, when I distinguished a sledge and the distorted proportions of a well-known form within. Oh, with what a burning gush did hope revisit my heart. Warm tears filled my eyes, which I hastily wiped away, that they might not intercept the view I had of the demon. But still, my sight was dimmed by the burning drops until, given way to emotions that oppressed me, I wept aloud. But this was not the time for delay. I disencumbered the dogs of their dead companion, gave them a plentiful portion of food, and after an hour's rest, which was absolutely necessary and yet which was bitterly irksome to me, I continued my route. The sledge was still visible, nor did I again lose sight of it, except at the moments when, for a short time, some ice rock concealed it with its intervening crags. I, indeed, perceptibly gained on it, and when, after nearly 2 days' journey, I beheld my enemy at no more than a mile distant, my heart bounded within me. But now, when I appeared almost within grasp of my foe, my hopes were suddenly extinguished, and I lost all trace of him more utterly than I had ever done before. A ground sea was heard, the thunder of its progress, as the waters rolled and swelled beneath me, became every moment more ominous and terrific. I pressed on, but in vain. The wind arose, the sea roared, and as with the mighty shock of an earthquake, it split and cracked with a tremendous and overwhelming sound. The work was soon finished, and in a few minutes a tumultuous sea rolled between me and my enemy, and I was left drifting on a scattered piece of ice that was continually lessening, and thus preparing me for a hideous death. In this manner, many appalling hours passed. Several of my dogs died, and I myself was about to sink under the accumulation of distress when I saw your vessel riding at anchor and holding forth to me hopes of succor and life. I had no conception that vessels ever came so far north, and was astounded at the sight. I quickly destroyed part of my sledge to construct oars, and by these means was enabled, with infinite fatigue, to move my ice raft in the direction of your ship. I had determined, if you were going southwards, still to trust myself to the mercy of the seas, rather than abandon my purpose. I hoped to induce you to grant me a boat with which I could pursue my enemy. But your direction was northward. You took me on board when my vigor was exhausted, and I should soon have sunk over my multiplied hardships into a death which I still dread, for my task is unfulfilled. When will my guiding spirit, in conducting me to the demon, allow me the rest I so much desire? Or must I die, and he yet live? If I do, swear to me, Walton, he shall not escape, that you will seek him and satisfy my vengeance in his death. And do I dare to ask of you to undertake my pilgrimage, to endure the hardships that I have undergone? No. I'm not so selfish. Yet, when I am dead, if he should appear, if the ministers of vengeance should conduct him to you, swear that he shall not live. Swear that he shall not triumph over my accumulated woes and survive to add to the list of his dark crimes. He is eloquent and persuasive, and once his words had even power over my heart. But trust him not. His soul is as hellish as his form, full of treachery and fiend-like malice. Hear him not. Call on the names of William, Justine, Clerval, Elizabeth, my father, and of the wretched Victor, and thrust your sword into his heart. I will hover near and direct the steel aright. we're going to take a break here because that's the last bit of Vicky F's own words. And we're going to switch over to Walton. But before we do, anybody have any thoughts or anything they'd want to share? Let's see. Anmol Singh says, "Thank you, Joe. Because of you, I found Project Gutenberg. It's a gem of a place." It is indeed a fantastic archive. The folks who work to ensure that our arts and culture are available to folks all over the world for free are truly doing fantastic work. And as the kids say, you love to see it. Kai Farem says, "I guess this journey is a catabasis of sorts. So calling upon the dead is rather appropriate, as Victor journeys further and further into their territory." And then as we got to the part where they're describing like the mountains of ice and the shifting icebergs, Kai Farem says, "Oh yeah, he's really in the underworld now." Yeah, I'm not sure if how in the zeitgeist Dante's Inferno was at this point, but the cold level of hell is now like an iconic fixture in our culture. The thing is with stuff like that, like for all I know, Dante's books could have been recently reinterpreted into English at that time period, and everybody was reading it. And so this would be like a super obvious, like, ooh, look at that. That's what we're doing. Or maybe not. Maybe there hadn't been a good translation for a few years and it was hard to come by. Like, it's funny because the books and works that like we now remember from hundreds of years ago or even thousands of years ago get lost and rediscovered, and without keeping track of who knew what when. I'm not an expert enough or a scholar on this stuff to really know. But yeah, obviously, Shelley's drawing a lot from Milton and Paradise Lost. But, yeah. Okay, let's see. I'm going to take a few sips of my drink before we continue here. I will say, one of the things I'm going to do on the next book. We've done 3 books so far. We've done Dracula. We've done Moby Dick. And we've done Frankenstein. And Dracula was definitely the most fun in terms of the swapping of the character point of view and the voices and the letters. And Moby Dick was definitely the most weird in terms of what to write. Frankenstein is interesting too, but I'm kind of, like, as I'm reading more books like this, I'm starting to kind of triangulate on what works and what doesn't. One of the things I've realized is, unlike in Dracula where I was switching between the characters' voices all the time, we read Walton's voice back like 3 or 4 months ago, and we haven't read Walton since. And what I don't have as a practice, what I have not been doing that a real audiobook a real audiobook reader should be doing, is having a spreadsheet or a list of all the characters as they come up with notes about their voices. Like, Boston accent, high pitch, Boston accent, low pitch, Scottish accent, New Jersey accent, posh British, Cockney British. I feel like when I read Walton for the first time, I was kind of using my gentleman English voice, but I don't remember. Jamal _ raiding with a party of 70. It's the loudest raid on Twitch. Woo! I don't know if I have anything really loud here. Oh, yeah. I have these chains I forged in life that remind me that humanity was my business. Do these count? Welcome, Loud Raiders. Welcome, Jamal. Welcome, Swalliance. Welcome, Blonawesome. Welcome, Queen Jalava. Just so you know, Saturday night streams around here are a weird one. This is when I do my super grindy tasks for the week, where it's like, hey, we need to hang out at the spider spawner for 2 hours. And so we read novels out loud. We've previously read all of Dracula, like unabridged. That took about a year. And then we spent another year reading Moby Dick. And we went with something shorter this time. So, having completed Dracula and Moby Dick, we are now on the final chapter of Frankenstein. So, if you haven't read Frankenstein, spoiler alert, we're reading the last chapter of Frankenstein at this point. Queen Jalava says, oh man, I miss Dracula. Yep. Now, the thing is, though, I mean, all the books I'm reading, at some point, I'd like to go back and maybe do, like, a real book-on-tape version. Part of the goal of the exercise is, like, this gives me a chance to kind of improve skills. Like, I always thought it would be cool to read audiobooks, but I also knew that, like, that's something you have to practice in order to get good at. So I set aside 2 hours every Saturday to practice getting good at it. Welcome, Fatty McDaddy OG. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Crisali3 says, I once listened to a Doctor Who audiobook read by David Tennant, and hearing him imitate his co-stars' voices was amazing. Yeah. So, yeah, for those of you joining from the Jamal raid, I guess let's briefly ascend to the surface here. Hopefully it's not nighttime. We are on the HermitCraft server. Don't worry, the stream isn't all spiders. A good portion of it is, because that's what we actually need to do. But the HermitCraft server is a most excellent invite-only vanilla SMP server. I'm currently using the Voxy mod to keep the long-distance chunks cached. So, basically, the mod doesn't actually give me visual data from further away on the server than I'd have otherwise, but chunks I visited before will stay, like, loaded on my computer so that I can render them in the distance. That's also good because it keeps things spoiler-free. Like, if my friend Cub Fan over there had done a bunch of work lately, but didn't want people to show it in videos, it wouldn't show up when I pan over there until I fly over there. Crystal3 says, David Tennant doing an American character's accent had me dying of laughter. Yeah, that probably would be pretty funny. But yeah, so anyway, this is a pretty big server where we do large-scale builds. And that's part of why I can get away with spending 2 hours a week just on grinding materials and stuff. We're in the shopping district here. Everybody has different shops. Let's see, one of my shops here is F-tier books and legal representation. This is based on the Sanderson and Yao law firm from The Grinder, with some additional graffiti on there. I've also got the Tough shop, which is also the Calcite shop. Sorry, the rain really makes the rendering. We call this shop Toughest Teeth. And it's like a trophy for the person who has the toughest teeth. Yeah, for some reason I can't... Yeah, there we go. There's some tough teeth right there. Other shops of mine include Hello, my name is Laser Tag, which is a bunker under a giant Hello, my name is banner, sticker. Jamal says, this mod is so awesome. Gotta run, homie, but be lurking. Awesome, Jamal. Appreciate you bringing your raiders by. Thank you, as always. It's always fun sending my folks your way as well. Always pleased to see the progress you're making, too. So, yeah. Whereas in a Jamal world, you'd get something like this from one person. This is a big group effort. But I have fun with it. Okay. So we're going to head back down. Like I said, we're literally reading the final chapter of Frankenstein. And I don't want to keep folks waiting. If anybody wants to show the Jamal Raiders how the face camera expansions work, we're $15 away from the next face camera expansion milestone, and tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. Okay. So, let's find the tennis court that leads down to the spider sport. We stab all the spiders. We've got the spider sword, so we can't leave with it. There we go. So now we're back in a smooth stone spider spawner. This is a triple spider spawner. I don't have a traditional flying around camera, but I do have the Camutils mod, which lets me like pivot around myself. So you can see there's a few spider spawning dungeons here. I think this is a triple dungeon. I'm not sure where the third one is. Maybe it's just a double spider spawner. My pal Corrales made it. But anyway, it's fast enough. It functions. Every so often we have to pull the spider eyes out because they get clogged up. But that's okay. We're still getting stuff done. Being productive. And reading Frankenstein. So, anyway, yeah, thank you again to everybody who joined for the Jamal raid. If you're interested in catching more of my streams, my stream schedule is always available at joehills.net/soon. And if you're interested in the mods that I'm running, I keep a list of what mods I'm using on HermitCraft on my website as well. So you can check out Voxy mod. The Better mod is one of my favorites. It's made by one of my staff members, Toxic Glitter. It makes the "you can only sleep at night" text bigger the longer you click on the bed. So that way, if I'm just sitting here clicking, waiting for nighttime, get some dramatic text in there. I love dramatic texts. What? Jamal, you are too kind. You roll in with a raid and then with a tip. Ludicrous. Ludicrously kind. Thank you, Jamal, for tipping 15. So, if you've never seen a Joe Hill stream before, the way it works is the camera gets bigger when we hit certain tipping milestones. And we just hit one now, so please direct your attention to my face, because we're about to expand just. Ba 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 ba. We are now at the most obnoxious face camera expansion milestone, the Joni Stark helmet cam. We're reducing the opacity now to 60%. Each time the camera gets bigger, it also reduces in opacity. At this point, everybody who's tipped up until now has been making the camera more obnoxious. It's going to keep getting bigger, but it can't cover any more pixels on the screen. So the reductions in opacity mean that, on like a net basis, it's going to be less obnoxious from here on out. So everybody tipping up to now has been making the camera more obnoxious. Everybody on the way out is making it less obnoxious. We are 20 away from that next face camera expansion milestone. Thank you again to Jamal for supporting the arts and my work in particular. You are far, far too kind. So yeah, the what we're reading link is pinned at the top. We are just about to get to the Walton in continuation bit from August 26th of 17. One thing to note is that this story has, as one of the first science fiction stories, has kind of a framework of being retold by an unreliable person to an unreliable person. And so the idea is that the readers of the era might be like, what? This is sheer foolishness. I can't believe this story at all. I can't believe blah, blah, blah. But the fact that it's an unreliable narrator relaying it to an unreliable scribe is supposed to help the reader accept kind of the incredulity of the whole situation. Suspend disbelief, if you will. So we have just finished, before your raid came in, the final words of the core narrative, which is where Victor Frankenstein, who we lovingly call Vicky F., has just completed his story to Captain Walton, who is this, once again, unreliable scribe. He was seeking a paradise at the actual North Pole and charted a ship and has just been sailing due north, where he ran into Vicky F. on the ice. He's not smart, but he's rich. And so that's why his crew is working for him. But so we're going to kind of move one layer out in the onion that is this story. From Vicky F's narrative to Captain Walton, who is going to continue the story from his point of view to his sister, who he is writing to. So here we go. I need to practice. I haven't practiced the British gentleman voice for a while, so this is going to be a little rough. Let me see if I can do some test phrases to transition. It's 6 o'clock, and with BBC One, I'm Joseph Hills. Chapter 24 of Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus, by Mary Shelley. Walton, in continuation, August 26th, 17 blah blah blah. You have read this strange and terrific story, Margaret, and do you not feel your blood congeal with horror, like that which even now curdles mine? Sometimes, seized with sudden agony, he could not continue his tale. At others, his voice broken, yet piercing, uttered with difficulty the words, so replete with anguish. His fine and lovely eyes were now lighted up with indignation, now subdued to downcast sorrow, and quenched in infinite wretchedness. Sometimes he commanded his countenance and tones, and related the most horrible incidents with a tranquil voice, suppressing every mark of agitation. Then, like a volcano bursting forth, his face would suddenly change to an expression of the wildest rage, as he shrieked out imprecations on his persecutor. His tale is connected and told with an appearance of the simplest truth. Yet I own to you that the letters of Felix and Safie, which he showed me, and the apparition of the monster seen from our ship, brought to me a greater conviction of the truth of his narrative than his asseverations, however earnest and connected. Such a monster has, then, really, existence. I cannot doubt it, yet I am lost in surprise and admiration. Sometimes I endeavored to gain from Frankenstein the particulars of his creature's formation, but on this point he was impenetrable. "Are you mad, my friend?" said he. "Or whither does your senseless curiosity lead you? Would you also create for yourself and the world a demoniacal enemy? Pace! Pace! Learn my miseries, and do not seek to increase your own." Frankenstein discovered that I made notes concerning his history. He asked to see them, and then himself corrected and augmented them in many places, but principally in giving the life and spirit to the conversations he had with his enemy. "Since you have preserved my narration," said he, "I would not that a mutilated one should go down to posterity." Thus has a week passed away, while I have listened to the strangest tale that ever imagination formed. My thoughts and every feeling of my soul have been drunk up by the interest for my guest, which this tale and his own elevated and gentle manners have created. I wish to soothe him. Yet can I counsel one so infinitely miserable, so destitute of every hope or consolation to live? Oh, no. The only joy that he can now know will be when he composes his shattered spirit to peace and death. Yet he enjoys one comfort, the offspring of solitude and delirium. He believes that when in dreams he holds converse with his friends, and derives from them that communion, consolation for his miseries or excitements to his vengeance. That they are not the creations of his fancy, but the beings themselves who visit him from regions of a remote world. This faith gives a solemnity to his reveries that render them to me almost as imposing and interesting as truth. Our conversations are not always confined to his own history and misfortunes. On every point of general literature, he displays unbounded knowledge and a quick and piercing apprehension. His eloquence is forceful and touching, nor can I hear him
when he relates a pathetic incident or endeavors to move the passions of pity or love without tears. What a glorious creature must he have been in the days of his prosperity, when he is thus noble and godlike in ruin. He seems to feel his own worth and the greatness of his fall.
"When younger," said he, "I believed myself destined for some great enterprise. My feelings are profound, but I possessed a coolness of judgment that fitted me for illustrious achievements. This sentiment of the worth of my nature supported me when others would have been oppressed, for I deemed it criminal to throw away in useless grief those talents that might only be useful to my fellow creatures. When I reflected on the work I had completed, no less a one than the creation of a sensitive and rational animal, I could not rank myself with the herd of common projectors. But this thought, which supported me in the commencement of my career, now serves only to plunge me lower in the dust. All my speculations and hopes are as nothing. And, like the archangel who aspired to omnipotence, I am chained in an eternal hell. My imagination was vivid, yet my powers of analysis and application were intense. By the union of these qualities, I conceived the idea and executed the creation of a man. Even now, I cannot recollect without passion my reveries while the work was incomplete. I trod heaven in my thoughts, now exulting in my powers, now burning with the idea of their effects. From my infancy, I was imbued with high hopes and lofty ambition. But how am I sunk? Oh, my friend, if you had known me as I once was, you would not recognize me in this state of degradation. Despondency rarely visited my heart. A high destiny seemed to bear me on until I fell, never again to rise. Must I then lose this admirable being? I have longed for a friend. I have sought one who would sympathize with and love me. Behold, on these desert seas I have found such a one. But I fear I have gained him only to know his value and lose him. I would reconcile him to life, but he repulses the idea. "I thank you, Walton," he said, "for your kind intentions towards so miserable a wretch. But when you speak of new ties and fresh affections, think you that any can replace those who are gone? Can any man be to me as Clerval was, or any woman another Elizabeth? Even where the affections are not strongly moved by any superior excellence, the companions of our childhood always possess a certain power over our minds which hardly any later friends can obtain. They know our infantine dispositions, which, however they may afterwards be modified, are never eradicated, and they can judge of our actions with more certain conclusions as to the integrity of our motives. a sister, or a brother can never, unless indeed such symptoms have been shown early, suspect the other of fraud or false dealing, when another friend, however strongly he may be attached, may, in spite of himself, be contemplated with suspicion. But I enjoyed friends, dear not only through habit and association, but from their own merits, and wherever I am, the soothing voice of my Elizabeth and the conversations of Clerval will be ever whispered in my ear. They are dead. But one feeling in such a solitude can persuade me to preserve my life. If I were engaged in any high undertaking or design, fraught with extensive utility to my fellow creatures, then I could live to fulfill it. But such is not my destiny. I must pursue and destroy the being to whom I gave existence. Then my lot on earth will be fulfilled, and I may die. So we're going to take a break real quick. That concludes the August 26th letter. And up next is the September 2nd letter. If you're reading along at home, you can follow the links, what we're reading, and look for My Beloved Sister, September 2nd. Anyone have any thoughts or anything they want to share on that last segment there? We're kind of transitioning from the pure Frankenstein narrative to now Frankenstein and Walton on the ship. We got a comment from Kai Farem that apparently Shelley had read some of Dante's Divine Comedy because it's on her reading list. Okay, yeah, so that makes sense then, that there's a fair comparison between the icy levels of hell in Dante and in Shelley's northern landscape. Ray in the YouTube chat writes, I read Frankenstein for school a few months ago when Joe started reading it on stream, and he's finally finishing it. Yep, I have. It took a while. I'm glad to be here with y'all, getting stuff done on the server, and also, enjoying a little bit of a self-improvement. Like I said, I've always found it interesting, the idea of trying to read books on tape, but even though I'm a very self-confident person, I know it's the sort of thing that you got to practice and iterate on, and I am learning from my mistakes. I'm making a lot of mistakes on these reading streams, but I'm happy with my progress and my observations of my failings, and yeah, this has been a really great exercise, so thank you guys for joining me on it. We do have a few letters left from Captain Walton to his beloved sister. Centauratron says, wow, this is a long chapter in the Discord chat. Yeah, I mean, it's the finale, you got to go big. Go big or duck off camera, right? Just kidding. The camera's huge. I'm big. I got it. We're Tom Hanks up in this. Ivan C. says, even in his final days, he refuses to give a lonely being companionship. No, I disagree there, Ivan. I think Victor does recognize, and he's sharing this story partially to be a friend to Walton, but he's telling Walton, like, don't deceive yourself, man. I can't be the friend you're looking for because you're looking for a lifelong friend, and I am literally on the brink of death. Like, I think he's trying to be a friend while he can. I think the way he treats Walton is generally appreciative and friendly, but he's just like, dude, you can't expect me to survive this. Like, just reasonable expectations. Bengineer says, Frankenstein has been a terrible father to his creature. Yep, that's a recurring theme. Yep, I'm going to agree. At every point in the story, Frankenstein could have reasonably done better. Not due to hindsight, but just like, boy, if he had talked to other people and thought this through, this whole thing could have gone way better. But he didn't. He did not think basically any part of this through. Ray in the YouTube chat says, Victor is such a complex character, it's actually hard to form a positive or negative opinion of him. I've got a pretty negative opinion of him. Like, he's capable of learning academic things, but he's, like, incapable of learning from his own mistakes. And he's incapable... He talks a lot about how much he depends on the friendship of those around him, but he never confides in them. He never shares with them his plans in such a way that they could be like, okay, dude, you're brilliant, off the charts smart, that's a cool idea, but what if we just a little tweak so we can, let's take your great idea and just make sure that we execute it perfectly, right? Like it's not even like he's surrounded by yes men who are constantly like, yeah, whatever you say, boss. He's surrounded by people who would be willing to give him good advice if he asked for it. But he doesn't. That's the part to me that's like he could have learned to be a good father partially by trying to communicate more with his own father. You know, he could have, at any point, he could have said to his dad, you know, one day when I'm married to Elizabeth, my greatest fear is that I won't be able to be as good a father as you were. Can you tell me what it was like for you and Mother when each of us was born? When each of us came into the family, how did you make us feel loved? How did you, like, he's surrounded by all the people that have the answers to the problems that he has, and he claims to love them and respect them, but he just consistently fails to build anything from those relationships. He thinks he can only accomplish things from his own intellect, and he fails to see that the mingling of his intellect and intuition and the counsel of the people he loves is where he could truly positively impact the world. That's the tragedy to me. We got a tip rolling in from Christina, who says, really enjoying your streams. Thanks for the interesting conversation. Thank you, Christina. That gets us halfway to our next face camera expansion milestone. Tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. And we got some more of the experience orbs rolling in. I have a feeling that we might have some full hoppers here of spider eyes. Or not. Apparently not. Okay. I was gonna say, it seems like every time I empty the spider eyes, they just pour back in. But it looks like we got them all. For now. It's only for now. Hoppers. Ba-ba-ba-ba. Okay. So, for those of you reading along at home who are jumping in with us, we are on Henry Walton's Chapter 24, Letter to His Sister, dated September 2nd, and we're going to resume our reading here.
My beloved sister, September 2nd. I write to you, encompassed by peril, and ignorant whether I am ever doomed to see again dear England, and the dearer friends that inhabit it. I am surrounded by mountains of ice, which admit of no escape, and threaten every moment to crush my vessel. The brave fellows whom I have persuaded to be my companions look toward me for aid, but I have none to bestow. There is something terribly appalling in our situation, yet my courage and my hopes do not desert me. Yet it is terrible to reflect that the lives of all these men are endangered through me. If we are lost, my mad schemes are the cause. And what, Margaret, will be the state of your mind? You will not hear of my destruction, and you will anxiously await my return. Years will pass, and you will have visitings of despair, and yet be tortured by hope. Oh, my beloved sister, the sickening failing of your heartfelt expectations is in prospect more terrible to me than my own death. But you have a husband and lovely children. You may be happy. Heaven bless you and make you so. My unfortunate guest regards me with the tenderest compassion. He endeavors to fill me with hope, and talks as if life were a possession which he valued. He reminds me how often the same accidents have happened to other navigators who have attempted this sea, and, in spite of myself, he fills me with cheerful auguries. Even the sailors feel the power of his eloquence. When he speaks, they no longer despair. He rouses their energies, and while they hear his voice, they believe these vast mountains of ice are molehills that will vanish before the resolutions of man. These feelings are transitory. Each day of expectation delayed fills them with fear, and I almost dread a mutiny caused by this despair. September 5th. A scene has just passed of such uncommon interest that, although it is highly probable that these papers may never reach you, I cannot forbear recording it. We are still surrounded by mountains of ice, still in imminent danger of being crushed in their conflict. The cold is excessive, and many of my unfortunate comrades have already found a grave amidst this scene of desolation. Frankenstein has daily declined in health. A feverish fire still glimmers in his eyes, but he is exhausted. And when suddenly roused to any exertion, he speedily sinks again into apparent lifelessness. I mentioned in my last letter the fears I entertained of a mutiny. This morning, as I sat watching the wan countenance of my friend, his eyes half closed, and his limbs hanging listlessly, I was roused by half a dozen of the sailors, who demanded admission into the cabin. They entered, and the leader addressed me. He told me that he and his companions had been chosen by the other sailors to come in deputation to make to me a requisition which, in justice, I could not refuse. We were immured in ice, and should probably never escape, but they feared that if, as was possible, the ice should dissipate and a free passage be opened, I should be rash enough to continue my voyage and lead them into fresh dangers, after they might have happily have surmounted this. They insisted, therefore, that I should engage with a solemn promise that if the vessel should be freed, I would instantly direct my course southwards. This speech troubled me. I had not despaired, nor had I yet conceived the idea of returning if set free. Yet could I, in justice, or even in possibility, refuse this demand? I hesitated before I answered. When Frankenstein, who had at first been silent, and indeed appeared hardly to have force enough to attend, now roused himself, his eyes sparkled, and his cheeks flushed with momentary vigor. Turning toward the men, he said,
What do you mean? What are you demanding, your captain? Are you then so easily turned from your design? Did you not call this a glorious expedition? And wherefore was it glorious? Not because the way was as smooth and as placid as a southern sea, but because it was full of dangers and terror, because at every new incident your fortitude was to be called forth and your courage exhibited, because danger and death surrounded it, and these you were to brave and overcome. For this was it a glorious, for this was it an honorable undertaking. You were hereafter to be hailed as the benefactors of your species, your names adored as belonging to brave man who had encountered death for honor and the benefit of mankind. And now, behold, with the first imagination of danger, or, if you will, the first mighty and terrific trial of your courage, you shrink away and are content to be handed down as men who had not strength enough to endure cold and peril. And so, poor souls, they were chilly and returned to their warm firesides. Why, that requires not this preparation. You need not have come thus far and dragged your captain to the shame of a defeat merely to prove yourselves cowards. Be man, or be more than man. Be steady to your purposes and firm as a rock. This ice is not made of such stuff as your hearts may be. It is mutable and cannot withstand you if you say that it shall not. Do not return to your families with the stigma of disgrace marked upon your brows. Return as heroes who have fought and conquered and who know not what it is to turn their backs on the foe. He spoke this with a voice so modulated to the different feelings expressed in his speech, with an eye so full of lofty designs and heroism, that can you wonder that these men were moved? They looked at one another and were unable to reply. I spoke. I told them to retire and consider of what had been said, that I would not lead them farther north if they strenuously desired the contrary, but that I hoped that with reflection their courage would return. They retired, and I turned toward my friend, but he was sunk in languor and almost deprived of life. How all this will terminate, I know not, but I had rather die than return shamefully, my purpose unfulfilled. Yet I fear such will be my fate. The men, unsupported by ideas of glory and honor, can never willingly continue to endure their present hardships. And that concludes that letter. 1 second here. September 7th. The die is cast. I have consented to return if we are not destroyed. Thus are my hopes blasted by cowardice and indecision. I come back ignorant and disappointed. It requires more philosophy than I possess to bear this injustice with patience. September 12th. It is past. I am returning to England. I have lost my hopes of utility and glory. I have lost my friend. But I will endeavor to detail these bitter circumstances to you, my dear sister, and while I am wafted toward England and towards you, I will not despond. September 9th, the ice began to move, and roarings like thunder were heard at a distance, as the island split and cracked in every direction. We were in the most imminent peril, but as we could only remain passive, my chief attention was occupied by my unfortunate guest, whose illness increased in such a degree that he was entirely confined to his bed. The ice cracked behind us, and was driven with force toward the north. A breeze sprang from the west, and on the 11th, the passage toward the south became perfectly free. When the sailors saw this, and that their return to their native country was apparently assured, a shout of tumultuous joy broke from them, loud and long continued. Frankenstein, who was dozing, awoke and asked the cause of the tumult. "They shout," I said, "because they will soon return to England." "Do you, then, really return?" "Alas, yes, I cannot withstand their demands. I cannot lead them unwillingly to danger, and I must return." "Do so, if you will, but I will not. You may give up on your purpose, but mine is assigned to me by heaven, and I daren't. I'm weak, but surely the spirits who assist my vengeance will endow me with sufficient strength." Saying this, he endeavored to spring from the bed, but the exertion was too great for him. He fell back and fainted. It was long before he was restored.
and I often thought that life was entirely extinct. At length he opened his eyes. He breathed with difficulty, and was unable to speak. The surgeon gave him a composing draught, and ordered us to leave him undisturbed. In the meantime, he told me that my friend had certainly not many hours to live. His sentence was pronounced, and I could only grieve and be patient. I sat by his bed, watching him. His eyes were closed, and I thought he slept. But presently he called to me in a feeble voice, and bidding me come near, said, "Alas, the strength I relied on is gone. I fear that I shall soon die, and he, my enemy and persecutor, may still be in being. Think not, Walton, that in the last moments of my existence I feel that burning hatred and ardent desire of revenge I once expressed, but I feel myself justified in desiring the death of my adversary. During these last days I have been occupied in examining my past conduct, nor do I find it blamable. In a fit of enthusiastic madness, I created a rational creature, and was bound toward him to assure, as far as was in my power, his happiness and well-being. This was my duty, but there still was another paramount to that. My duties toward the beings of my own species had greater claims to my attention, because they included a greater proportion of happiness or misery. Urged by this view, I refused, and I did right in refusing, to create a companion for the first creature. He showed unparalleled malignity and selfishness and evil. He destroyed my friends. He devoted to destruction beings who possessed exquisite sensations, happiness, and wisdom. Nor do I know where this thirst for vengeance may end. Miserable himself, that he may render no other wretched. He ought to die. The task of his destruction was mine, but I have failed. When actuated by selfish and vicious motives, I asked you to undertake my unfinished work, and I renew this request now, when I am only induced by reason, virtue. Yet, I cannot ask you to renounce your friends and country to fulfill this task. And now that you are returning to England, you will have little chance of meeting with him. But the consideration of these points, and the well-balancing of what you may esteem your duties, I leave to you. My judgment and ideas are already disturbed by the near approach of death. I dare not ask you to do what I think is right, for I may still be misled by passion. That he should live to be an instrument of mischief disturbs me in other respects. This hour, when I momentarily expect my release, is the only happy one which I've enjoyed for several years. The forms of the beloved dead flit before me, and I hasten to their arms.
Farewell, Walton. Seek happiness in tranquility, and avoid ambition, even if it be only the apparently innocent one of distinguishing yourself in science and discoveries. Yeah, why do I say this? I have myself been blessed in these hopes. Yet another may succeed.
His voice became fainter as he spoke, and at length, exhausted by his effort, he sank into silence. About half an hour afterwards, he attempted again to speak, but was unable. He pressed my hand feebly, and his eyes closed forever, while the irradiation of a gentle smile passed away from his lips. Margaret, what comment can I make on the untimely extinction of this glorious spirit? What can I say that will enable you to understand the depth of my sorrow? All that I should express would be inadequate and feeble. My tears flow. My mind is overshadowed by a cloud of disappointment. But I journey toward England, and I may there find consolation. I am interrupted. What do these sounds portend? It is midnight, the breeze blows fairly, and the watch on deck scarcely stir. Again, there is a sound as of a human voice, but hoarser. It comes from the cabin, where the remains of Frankenstein still lie. I must arise and examine. Good night, my sister. Great God, what a scene has just taken place. I am yet dizzy with the remembrance of it. I hardly know whether I shall have the power to detail it. Yet the tale which I have recorded would be incomplete without this final and wonderful catastrophe. I entered the cabin where lay the remains of my ill-fated and admirable friend. Over him hung a form which I cannot find words to describe. Gigantic in stature, yet uncouth and distorted in its proportions. As he hung over the coffin, his face was concealed by long locks of ragged hair, but one vast hand was extended, in color and apparent texture, like that of a mummy. When he heard the sound of my approach, he ceased to utter exclamations of grief and horror, and sprung toward the window. Never did I behold a vision so horrible as his face, of such loathsome yet appalling hideousness. I shut my eyes involuntarily, and endeavored to recollect what my duties were with regard to this destroyer. I called on him to stay, He paused, looking on me with wonder, and again turning toward the lifeless form of his creator. He seemed to forget my presence, and every feature and gesture seemed instigated by the wildest rage of some uncontrollable passion. That also is my victim! In his murder, my crimes are consummated. The miserable series of my being is wound to its close. Oh, Frankenstein, generous and self-devoted being! What does it avail that I now ask thee to pardon me? I, who irretrievably destroyed thee by destroying all thou lovest. Alas, he is cold. He cannot answer me. His voice seemed suffocated, and my first impulses, which had suggested to me the duty of obeying the dying request of my friend in destroying his enemy, were now suspended by a mixture of curiosity and compassion. I approached this tremendous being. I dared not again raise my eyes to his face. There was something so scaring and unearthly in his ugliness. I attempted to speak, but the words died away on my lips. The monster continued to utter wild and incoherent self-reproaches. At length I gathered resolution to address him in a pause of the tempest of his passion. Your repentance, I said, is now superfluous. If you had listened to the voice of conscience and heeded the stings of remorse before you had urged your diabolical vengeance to this extremity, Frankenstein would yet have lived. And do you dream? Said the demon. Do you think that I was then dead to agony and remorse? He suffered not in the consummation of the deed, not the 10,000th portion of the anguish that was mine during the lingering detail of its execution. A frightful selfishness hurried me on, while my heart was poisoned with remorse. Think you that the groans of Clerval were music to my ears? My heart was fashioned to be susceptible of love and sympathy, and when wrenched by misery to vice and hatred, it did not endure the violence of the change without torture, such as you cannot even imagine. After the murder of Clerval, I returned to Switzerland, heartbroken and overcome. I pitied Frankenstein. My pity amounted to horror. I abhorred myself. But when I discovered that he, the author at once of my existence and its unspeakable torments, dared to hope for happiness, that while he accumulated wretchedness and despair upon me, he sought his own enjoyment in feelings and passions from the indulgence of which I was forever barred, then impotent envy and bitter indignation filled me with an insatiable thirst for vengeance. I recollected my threat and resolved that it should be accomplished. I knew that I was preparing myself for a deadly torture, but I was the slave, not the master, of an impulse which I detested, yet could not disobey. Yet, when she died, nay, then I was miserable. Nay, I was not miserable. I had cast off all feeling, subdued all anguish, to riot in the excess of my despair. Evil, thenceforth, became my good. Urgent thus far, I had no choice but to adapt my nature to an element which I had willingly chosen. The completion of my demoniacal design became an insatiable passion. And now it is ended. There is my last victim. I was at first touched by the expression of his misery. Yet, when I called to mind what Frankenstein had said of his powers of eloquence and persuasion, and when I again cast my eyes on the lifeless form of my friend, indignation was rekindled within me. Wretch! It is well that you come here to whine over the desolation that you have made. You throw a torch into a pile of buildings, and when they are consumed, you sit among the ruins and lament the fall. Hypocritical fiend! If he whom you mourn still lived, still would he be the object, again would he become the prey of your accursed vengeance. It is not pity that you feel. You lament only because the victim of your malignity is withdrawn from your power. Oh, it is not thus. And thus, interrupted the being. Yet, such must be the impression conveyed to you by what appears to be the purport of my actions. Yet, I seek not a fellow feeling in my misery. No sympathy may I ever find. When I first sought it, it was the love of virtue, the feelings of happiness and affection which my whole being overflowed, that I wished to be participated. But now that virtue has become to me a shadow, and that happiness and affection are turned into bitter and loathing despair, in what should I seek for sympathy? I am content to suffer alone, while my sufferings shall endure. When I die, I am well satisfied that abhorrence and opprobrium should load my memory. Once my fancy was soothed with dreams of virtue, of fame, of enjoyment. Once, I falsely hoped to meet with beings who, pardoning my outward form, would love me for the excellent qualities which I was capable of unfolding. I was nourished with high thoughts of honor and devotion. But now, crime has degraded me beneath the meanest animal. No guilt, no mischief, no malignity, no misery can be found comparable to mine. When I run over the frightful catalog of my sins, I cannot believe that I am the same creature whose thoughts were once filled with sublime and transcendent visions of the beauty and the majesty of goodness. But it is even so. The fallen angel becomes a malignant devil. Yet, even that enemy of God and man had friends and associates in his desolation. I am alone. You, who call Frankenstein your friend, seem to have... Oh, sorry. It was wrong voice. It's still the beast. You, who call Frankenstein your friend, seem to have a knowledge of my crimes and his misfortunes. But in the detail which he gave you of them, he could not sum up the hours and months of misery which I endured, wasting in impotent passions. For while I destroyed his hopes, I did not satisfy my own desires. They were forever ardent and craving. Still, I desired love and fellowship, and I still was spurned. Was there no injustice in this? Am I to be thought the only criminal when all humankind sinned against me? Why do you not hate Felix, who drove his friend from his door with contumely? Why do you not execrate the rustic who sought to destroy the savior of his child? Nay, these are virtuous and immaculate beings. I am miserable and the abandoned, am an abortion to be spurned by all, and kicked and trampled on. Even now, my blood boils at the recollection of this injustice. But it is true that I am a wretch. I have murdered the lovely and the helpless. I have strangled the innocent as they slept, and grasped to death his throat who never injured me, or any other living thing. I have devoted my Creator, the select specimen of all that is worthy of love and admiration among men, to misery. I have pursued him even to that irredeemable ruin. There he lies, white and cold in death. You hate me, but your abhorrence cannot equal that with which I regard myself. I look on the hands which executed the deed. I think on the heart in which the imagination of it was conceived, and long for the moment when these hands will meet my eyes, when that imagination will haunt my thoughts no more. Fear not that I shall be the instrument of future mischief. My work is nearly complete. Neither yours nor any man's death is needed to consummate the series of my being and accomplish that which must be done. But it requires my own. Do not think that I shall be slow to perform this sacrifice. I shall quit your vessel on the ice raft which brought me thither, and shall speak the northern extremity of the globe. I shall collect my funeral pile, and consume to ashes this miserable frame, that its remains may afford no light to any curious and unhallowed wretch who would create such another as I have been. I shall die. I shall no longer feel the agonies which now consume me, or be the prey of feelings unsatisfied, yet unquenched. He is dead who called me into being, and when I shall be no more, the very remembrance of us both will speedily vanish. I shall no longer see the sun, or stars, or feel the winds play on my cheeks. Light, feeling, and sense will pass away, and in this condition must I find my happiness. Some years ago, when the images which this world affords first opened upon me, when I felt the cheering warmth of summer and heard the rustling of the leaves and the warbling of the birds, and these were all to me, I should have wept to die. Now it is my only consolation. Polluted by crimes and torn by the bitterest remorse, where can I find rest but in death? Farewell! I leave you, and in you, the last of humankind, whom these eyes will ever behold. Farewell, Frankenstein. If thou wert yet alive, and yet cherished a desire of revenge against me, it would be better satiated in my life than in my destruction. But it was not so. Thou didst seek my extinction, that I might not cause greater wretchedness, and if yet, in some mode unknown to me, thou hadst not ceased to think and feel, thou wouldst not desire against me a vengeance greater than that which I feel. Blasted as thou wert, my agony was still superior to thine, for the bitter sting of remorse will not cease to rankle in my wounds, until death shall close them forever. But soon, he cried, with sad and solemn enthusiasm, I shall die. And what I now feel be no longer felt. Soon these burning miseries will be extinct. I shall ascend my funeral pile triumphantly, and exult in the agony of the torturing flames. The light of that conflagration will fade away. My ashes will be swept into the sea by the winds. my spirit will sleep in peace. Or, if it thinks, it will not surely think thus. Farewell. He sprang from the cabin window as he said this, upon the ice raft which lay close to the vessel. He was soon borne away by the waves and lost in the darkness and distance.
And thus concludes the Project Gutenberg ebook of Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus, by Mary Shelley. I'm Joe Hills. This has been a viewer-supported stream. Thank you to everybody who's supported us thus far. We're going to hang out for another 10 minutes, do last call for tips, and final chat about the conclusion of the story. I saw we had a raid come in. Thank you very much to Silent Whisperer for the raid. Welcome, Silent Raiders. Yeah, you guys came in as we were on, like, the final scene of a book we've been reading for months. I saw the raid, and I was like, I can't interrupt, like, the monster's monologue for the raid. Sorry. Thank you for being patient with me, Raiders, if you're still here. We have read Dracula, Moby Dick, and Frankenstein, each on stream, and it has been a fantastic time. On Saturday nights, I like to read aloud while I do really grindy stuff in Minecraft. Unforgivably grindy stuff. You can't just sit here at the spider thing for 2 hours, but maybe a book will help, you know? So that's what we're doing here. Oh boy, that's a lot of spider eyes there. We're going to pick those up, and we're going to move those into one of these many chests here. And we can also move our string on over. Lenari says it was an interesting story, Joe. Thank you for reading. Narya says, so where are we on this entire novel being a Santa Claus origin story? Yeah. Could be. Could be. I will say, I know that the quote, like, the text is that the beast is Pinky swearing he's about to go murder himself and burn himself alive so no other scientist can learn from his remains. But it kind of feels like, to me, he's indulging Walton's delusions. When he's like, I'm going to sail so far north that I find the place that's full of the trees you're looking for, and then I'm going to burn myself alive with all the trees you're looking for on the mystical island oasis that you think exists at the North Pole. Yep, that's where I'm going, the totally real place. I bet you that the monster has seen enough of the North to be like, no, this guy is dumb. This guy is so dumb, and he's going to totally fall for it. On this reading, I kind of gave the monster a little bit of a condescending tone to Walton, which I think the text supports. Because the other thing, too, is that Frankenstein explicitly warns Walton, do not be deceived by his words and his... which, maybe Frankenstein's incapable of understanding the monster could have a change of heart. I think that the best case scenario is the monster genuinely did have a change of heart. That has just been toying with Victor all this time, and he's legitimately sad that Victor's now dead. But he's, like, not going to go kill himself over it. He's going to go find somewhere else to be. But he needs to make sure that Walton doesn't, you know, retask his ship with hunting him across the ice floe. Because, like, there's a good chance that an ice raft can't outrun a ship. Crystalli3 says, you know, earlier Victor mentioned the following the large footprints of the creature. I'm thinking he became Bigfoot. Fair enough. The creature does have large footprints. The text does support that, in theory. Just as a reminder, we are $10 away from our next face camera expansion milestone. These are viewer-supported streams. So if you enjoy this, feel free to tip and continue to make this possible. Okay. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, wow. Shopping district entrance, always a little slow. Let's fly up in the heavens and look at that place down below where we need to take all the string as we sing. HermitCraft Season 10, everybody. Woo! Okay. So let's HermitCraft Season descend out this way. Now I kind of want to go watch Young Frankenstein. Since I knew I was reading Frankenstein, I've avoided all depictions of Frankenstein in media, with the exception of the Monster Bash pinball machine and also the Munsters pinball machine, during the duration of this. I try not to, like, review stuff. Like, I tried not to look at anything Dracula-related while I was doing Dracula. With Moby Dick, I looked at Evan Dom's illustrations, but that was it. I didn't, like, rewatch the miniseries or anything. Hey, thank you very much to Algorithm32 for tipping 10, who says, thanks for reading. Thank you, Algorithm. That gets us evenly to our next Face Camera Expansion milestone. If you've never seen a Joe Hill stream before, you might not know the camera gets bigger when we hit certain tipping milestones. We call this one the Joni Stark Helmet Cam, but what we're about to see next is T. Joe Eckhillsberg. Here we go. It's time to expand Jost. Do-do-do-do. And Raystar says, wow, that painting session flew by. I'm glad to hear it, Raystar. We're going to lower the Joe opacity now to 50%. We are now 20 even away from our next face camera expansion milestone. Alrighty, catch you later, Darwin. For those of y'all who haven't seen my streams before, feel free to follow or subscribe or whatever they call it. Twitch and YouTube have different words. My stream schedule is always available at joehills.net/soon. A few other things I want to make sure to shout out. So if anybody's in the Nashville area, my sister Quinn Hills has a show tomorrow night, which is why my birthday stream tomorrow is going to be in the middle of the day, not at night. You can find Quinn's shows at quinnhills.net/shows, July 20th. Tomorrow, Quinn is playing with Juniper Jeffries and High Days at Dark Matter. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm sure Quinn would appreciate a crowd. So feel free to show up if you're in the Nashville area, and when you want to see the person who did all the music for my shows, come hang out. Thank you to Sion for tipping 20, who says, thanks for reading and happy birthday weekend. Thank you very much, Sion. That does indeed get us another face camera expansion. So here we go. It's time to expand Jost. Do-do-do-do. And we are going to lower the Joe opacity now to 42%. La-da-da-da. Thank you very much, Sion. Appreciate it. Okay. Ivan C says it would be fun to make a sled not far from Corrales' ice ship with the wretch on it. That would be fun. Pepper Basenji says, thank you, Joe, for reading the book Frankenstein. Looking forward to the next book that you'll pick to read aloud. Yeah, I'm not sure on that yet. I like to take a couple weeks or a few weeks between books just to read some random poetry and short stories and kind of mentally reset. Also, we're kind of hitting a point on this season where we're kind of post-grind for the most part. This string is like an odd exception to that. But like for the most part, we have almost everything we need for our builds. So it might not make sense to continue doing the Saturday night readings when that time could be better spent like actually building like armor stands. Like there's no way for me to build like the JWST armor stand or like this one during a reading stream. Kind of the same thing goes for trying to build the Arecibo telescope here. We're going to be cutting a dish into the ground here. And in order to do that, it's like we don't really need... Oh, actually, you know what? Well, let's replace that gray wool with green wool now that I'm thinking about it. That would look more like the lush landscape around the thing. Centauratron's thoughts on Frankenstein. That book was way better and way different than I expected. Hey, I'm glad. That's part of the fun of reading books that are, like, really integrated into our culture. Like Dracula, Frankenstein, and Moby Dick, they get referenced all over the place. But it's fun to actually go back to the source material and experience them together. Crystalli3 says, I think there's a message in the book about being the cause of your own misery. I think letting your ambition isolate you from your friends and community and family is the creation of your own misery. Guy4M says, I like the juxtaposition between the creature's isolation, which is imposed on it by others, and Victor's, which is more innate, like bad decisions. Yeah. Crystalli3 says, I acquired a Chandra telescope poster today, and it's so neat. Building a Chandra telescope is one of the to-do items for our museum, so keep an eye out for that. Let's go ahead and grab at least 10 wool here. Yeah, that's enough for that area. We might end up wanting to use moss too, but... Okay. Let's do the Frankenstein again. Okay. Making sure that we got everybody. Let's go ahead. So sometimes PayPal on the weekends takes a second to register tips. I want to make sure that everybody who deserves to be thanked gets thanked. So I'm going to log in on the app and do a hard refresh there. Usually that's the most up-to-date way. And it looks like we got everybody. Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for joining me tonight. Thank you for the raids, Jamal and Silent Whisperer, and we had a few other folks raiding as well. Appreciate all of you. Any raiders who stuck around for that reading of the final chapter of Frankenstein, who kind of thrown off the deep end? Yep, that's just how it be sometimes with Twitch. But, yeah, I'm glad that you guys stuck around and gave me a shot. Okay. So, let me see. Twitch.tv/following. Queen Jalava says, loved it so much. Thank you, Queen Jalava. Bum, bum, ba, bum, bum, ba, bum. Okay. It looks like Raccoon City Pinball is streaming Evil Knievel right now. So we're going to go ahead and raid them. When you get over there, our raid message is, howdy y'all, Joe Hill's raid here. NJ Coffee Junkie says, happy early birthday, Joe. Catch you tomorrow. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've got a birthday stream tomorrow from 1 to 5 Central. Should be a lot of fun. I'm going to be hanging out on the HermitCraft server. So anyway, until next time, y'all, this is Joe Hills from Nashville, Tennessee. Wait, did that raid not go? Why is it not showing up? Oh, yeah, there it is. Until next time, y'all, this is Joe Hills from Nashville, Tennessee.